Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Delve Further, the podcast where I actually remember what episode we're on. We're actually episode 9 with the Overwatch community legend, Heurix, who's been doing this.
Legend.
I would say so. Doing the casting thing for nearly going on 3 years now?
In Overwatch, yeah, almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years, probably late summer, I would say. I don't have like a hard date or anything like that, but yeah, I think late summer is when I actually got into casting because I was actually playing it prior to getting into the casting thing again from the previous game that I was doing prior to Overwatch.
Now, jumping directly into that, where did you kind of get your start? Because I find that esports has some kindred spirits. Like, we might not know that, like, we kind of like we're in the same community, like me and like Dreamcasts. We like happen to be two ships in the night following like the Halo community. So like, where did you kind of start?
Well, I got my start in a game that nobody's probably really ever heard of, or at least realized that they had an esports division at all, which was Guild Wars 2. Yeah. I would say pretty much anybody who's heard of that game would be very surprised to know that they actually had an esports division, but they did. And I led a team called Apex Prime that I created back then. I did some occasional management / coaching for a PvP team that was part of that group, that I guess guild, clan, whatever you want to call it. They were really solid. They were a top team at the time. Joined up with this organization called Digital Pro Sports that was into broadcasting. They just hosted a tournament that our team actually won. They said, hey, why don't you come out and come hang out with us? I was like, oh, cool. You're like an hour away. I'll definitely come out. They had this beautiful mansion, right? This beautiful mansion. Went out there. They had like food, drinks. We talked and they said, hey, we want to do some other tournaments, but we don't have a caster. Nobody can do it. And I was like, you know what? I can do it, I guess. They offered me some pizza and some beer, and I was like, let's go. Sounds like a good play. Wound up actually hooking up with ESL later on. We did some Go4s, and then we did Pro League eventually as part of their Pro League system that they had there, and it was Guild Wars 2 Pro League, went into Guild Wars 2 World Championship. So that's pretty much how I got my start, and then eventually just led into Overwatch with Academy Gaming.
That's again, like, super small world.
Yeah.
You know, I correct me if I'm wrong, because you seem pretty entrenched with that community. Did Jat, like the Riot caster Jat, didn't he play Guild Wars 2?
A lot, actually, like a lot of people played,
did, right?
Uber played Guild Wars 2
as
well. And actually Uber hosted one of the big events for Guild Wars 2 in the esports division in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. And it was done there, but I actually wasn't on that broadcast team. They actually used the European casters for that. So I missed out on actually meeting Uber back then, but that was back in 2015. It was actually that Uber actually did host a Guild Wars 2 event.
That's crazy. One of the older guys that worked kind of had penned a lot of articles at Winston's Lab, apparently was in the Guild Wars 2 scene as well. Yeah, I kind of heard some things from him, and it seemed pretty interesting. Like, he was spouting off some names. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that guy. Yeah. And I want to say Jat was in there. So Carl, if you're out there, you know, best of luck to you. I haven't heard from you in a while, but you know. But yeah.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people played it. There was also like some big hype around the game right prior to Pro League, because Soda Poppin was actually getting into it. And one of my friends that I occasionally still play games with, Fanoram, who was on one of the top teams pretty much throughout the entire history of the North American side of things there in that game, basically taught Soda Poppin the game. And there's a big YouTube video out if you want to look for that.
Yeah, I think I remember watching that stream, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is how you play this game. Like, you have to like weapon swap, and like, here's what the class is. Like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting now. Like, I had played it when it came out because I was really big into like World of Warcraft, as you know, many people were. And of course Guild Wars was like touted as this, you know, the WoW killer. Like, everybody like has got to migrate. Like, all my friend group moved over. I was like, I guess I'll give it a chance. And yeah, it was a really fun game, but again, you kind of just I fell a lot out of love with it. And I remember that stream. I remember kind of just tuning in. I think a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, Soda Poppin's like learning Guild Wars 2. And I tuned in. I guess that might have been the same video where the stream kind of was pulled from. But yeah, it's super interesting.
Right from the stream.
Wow.
Had like, I think that was Fanaram's biggest stream. He had like, probably like 15K viewers, and Soda Poppin was rocking like 40K or something at the time. So it was insane, especially because remember, this is what, almost 4 years ago now, something like that. I think that expansion came out like late 2014, maybe 2015. It might have been 2015, but either way, we're talking like 3-4 years ago. So those were some really big numbers for a game like Guild Wars 2 for sure.
No, I mean, okay, so Guild Wars 2, I think, and you can completely correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the competitive mode was like the 10v10 or like the 15v15, right? So how did that kind of work? Okay,
so my favorite aspect, there was 2 modes for competitive play in that game. My favorite personally, and I'll probably be chastised for this, and everybody will be mad at me for finally saying it publicly, but I preferred the Guild Wars 2 concept of GVG. It was very different than the Guild Wars 1 concept of GVG, where it was a lot more of, I think it was 8v8 in Guild Wars 1. If I'm not mistaken, someone's going to get mad at me if I mess that up, but I'm sorry, I didn't play Guild Wars 1. I never played it. But Guild Wars 2 was 15v15 and 20v20 for the GVG, and it was just straight deathmatch. And it was just pure, this team starts here, this team starts here, and it's just last man standing wins. Wow. I loved that aspect. I loved the brutality of it. I loved, everything that went into it, the strategy, the macro that was at play, because you have 15 to 20 people on each team. Like that is a very, very big thing. And strategy is something that I took from that game and pushed into Overwatch that has, I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more, but that's a big reason why I like some of these games is the strategy aspect. And then the other concept, the other pillar of the game was the 5v5, and that's what ESL picked up. That's what the game really pushed as their PvP competitive archetype of what was essentially a 3-point King of the Hill type setup called Conquest, where you effectively capture these points and then you get 1 point every second that you have a point captured, and first to 500 wins.
So like with your time watching the game, okay, so first, kind of leading into that question, you start off like, was the 15v15 or the 20v20 kind of like 2CP? Like you just don't like openly say you enjoy it, but like secretly you're like, ooh, I really enjoy 2CP.
Well, okay, so the first part of that, now that I'm not on Guild Wars anymore, I'm happy to finally be able to admit that Conquest was a terrible experience, and I'm glad that I'm glad that we've moved on from that into something that is far superior. But a lot of people still enjoy it. A lot of people still play the game, and there's still a scene there. They still even run community tournaments, so they're still going. But I will say that it's very difficult to imagine a world where, like, for instance, if Overwatch was only control and that was it, it would be hard to stay as entertained if that was all you ever got to see. And that's kind of my problem with the Conquest thing that happened in that game. But I actually, this might be a hot take, but I actually really like 2CP. I like playing it and I like watching it.
I have no problem with 2CP. Ladder. If I have like a 3-stack going, and like we can, but if I'm playing like solo queue and like I draw like Temple of Anubis, I'm just like, oh god, this is rough.
Yeah, nothing feels worse than having a 35-minute Volskaya match that you wind up drawing out or losing in the last final seconds.
Like, I'd rather just go through and play like 5 control maps in that time than I just spent playing 2CP. But I love watching it. I think that's like majority of where like you see a lot of the cool compositions come out, and you can really start to see a team's like cohesion and teamwork really shine is on 2CP. So I love watching it. Playing it, not so much. I also really like the map dichotomy, for like the dynamics of all of the maps that are on 2CP, like Anubis in particular. Really, you bring out a lot of different strategies that I find a lot more interesting. I mean, you see things come out, especially on like Anubis Point A, where you do have like
the dynamic of the Orisa defense versus the soft and hard dive type comps, and then the different ways that teams actually go about strategizing how to deal with that. I mean, you can see a lot of different intricacies of where you send your Genji Tracer, whether it be to the left going up the window and flanking, or go over to the right, and then you have the triple blink dash across from high ground to high ground. I mean, there's a lot of cool complexities that go into maps like that I don't think you see that much in other maybe more entertaining styles like Control or something like that.
You don't get a ton of thought process when it's Control. Granted, we've been
straight battle it out.
It's just you go to point, brawl it out, and then go from there. But yeah, not a ton of rotation macro play for Control. But yeah, esports, man, it's weird. God bless. Yeah. I've always kind of held the opinion that I think Overwatch would be a very different spectating experience if we did start with no hero limit, and then we just narrowed it down to one game mode and just like ran with only payload maps. We're only like, that's the competitive format. We're only going to play hybrid. We're only going to play payload. I think it probably would have made things a lot easier to understand, where it's just like, well, on this map you get 4 minutes, and then this map you get 2.5, and then you get 2 here, and then it's hard to really explain to people, and they do a good job, especially in the Overwatch League and some of the tier 2 broadcasts as well, of doing that explanation and having like fun content to kind of at least help people that are first tuning in explain it. So they try.
And I think the interesting thing about what's happening in this ecosystem versus what you would see in maybe even traditional sports or any other competitive ecosystem in the esports division as well, is that the tier 1 broadcast, the Overwatch League broadcast, is kind of responsible for teaching everybody the game. I mean, most of the casuals are going to start in Overwatch League, and then they're going to go down into some of these more, I guess you could call them farm leagues or whatever you want to say, like T2, whether it be Contenders or a tournament of that caliber, whether it be Beat, Pit, any other tournament, Nexus Cup, any of those that wind up sticking around long term. But and that becomes more of the in-depth, advanced kind of takes. But I think Overwatch League does do a fantastic job of not only providing entertainment, but also teaching everybody and preparing them to be able to actually watch the T2 content and be able to understand, oh, this is someone to look out for. This is a team to look out for. And this is what they do well. This is what they don't.
Speaking of people to look out for, I wanted to go back to Guild Wars 2 because I find that really interesting. Who are like some of the top players, and like give me some like fun legendary stories from the Guild Wars scene. If you can recall any.
Oh, I can definitely recall some. There's a lot of cool stuff that happened in Guild Wars 2, to be honest. I have a lot of fond memories that went on there. We had a guy named, I think I would be remiss if anybody watched this from Guild Wars 2 that still follow me on Twitter, and I didn't talk about Helseth. Lord Helseth is his name, actually.
I've heard of that name, rings a bell.
Yeah, he is the undisputed, self-proclaimed king of Guild Wars 2. He took a team that was kind of on its last legs, and then just kind of smashed it together with another really solid team in the Pro League. I think it was season 2, but they effectively went from a team in season 1 that was pretty solid, and he was a good player on an okay, mediocre team. I don't think he actually even made it to finals in season 1, but I could be mistaken about that. But then in season 2, they came out. Maybe he did. Maybe they did get second. I don't know. Either way, in season 2, they came back and they stomped everybody, and they were super strong, world champions in the actual world champion tournament that happened after season 2 as well. Pretty much could say that they were the best team towards the end of that competitive scene once ESL and Guild Wars 2 basically parted ways, and we didn't really have esports in the game anymore. Interestingly, they were the top team in EU, the top team probably globally as well at that stage, and the other team, the top NA team with Fanaram at the time, who was the person who taught Soda Poppin how to play the game.
Right.
They had a guy named Nos, and Nos was the necromancer player. He played that like death character and everything. Only played that character. Helseth, on the other hand, played the Mesmer character, which is very much similar. If you play Apex
like an
Legends,
illusionist kind of.
Yeah, if you play Apex, if you're thinking Mirage, exactly accurate. That is exactly what Mesmer is, pretty much. And then just also throw in the portal mechanic that you have on Wraith. So if you play Apex, very easy to understand what Mesmer is. But they had a matchup in that game. I'm not sure exactly who won, because this was back in like 2015 that they actually played this. And I think it was actually at Gamescom where Uber was there as well. And after the match, they said that they're going to do an arm wrestling competition. And this was like their great like 1v1 or whatever.
Okay.
So they do the arm wrestling 1v1. And I think Helseth won like the right-handed version or the left-handed version, and then Nas was like, okay, now we go and we swap hands, and straight broke his arm clean in two on their arm wrestle, and then forced the guy Grouch, who was leading the esports division of Arena at the time, to take Helseth to the hospital on his birthday. Grouch's birthday, and now Grouch is the like head of esports or something like that at Amazon Game Studios. So
crazy.
Absolutely insane how things turn out, I guess.
It really is a small world. It's absolutely crazy, like listening to everybody's kind of like origin story and learning a little bit about them and their history, like learning like how close or like at what scene they followed, and like who kind of like, again, like you guys in Uber, like I think that's really cool. Like it really is kind of like a little village, and you know,
yeah,
it's wild. But how what else would you say? What other games would you say you actively followed at the time?
I followed a couple. So working in Guild Wars 2, I also had spent a lot of time with Kalaris, who does a lot of casting for, well, he did a lot of casting for Heroes. He's got his start in StarCraft. So he does spend a lot of time on, I would say, primarily on Blizzard games. Now he's actually working on PUBG, and I think he's done some stuff with Matrim, who I know was actually on this podcast pretty recently as well. And I followed Matrim as well ever since, because Matrim was in Overwatch.
He's pretty much OG,
way back when I was doing stuff back in 2016. But yeah, so I did work with Kalaris, and you know, I was definitely keeping my eye on Heroes of the Storm. I was playing that game pretty regularly at the time. I think when the ladder was introduced, they didn't have like a tier system where it was like, you know, gold, silver, plat, whatever. It was basically a ranking system from 50 to 1, and if you were rank 1, that just means you were like, I don't know, like 1% or whatever. And I was rank 1 pretty much the entire time that I was doing the Guild Wars 2 stuff. So I was talking to Kalaris and maybe seeing if I wanted to get into that. Eventually just decided that Overwatch was going to be my new game. But I would say like Heroes of the Storm, probably like some COD action, because I don't think battle royales were really taking off at that point. Maybe other than H1Z1. Maybe maybe that was probably later than that as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough to really remember when peaks specifically were, but I think that probably like at least H1Z1 was out at the time. It might not have had caught fire as much as it did with on Twitch and whatnot. But you mentioned that, you know, you've been doing this for a long time, and I don't think people really realize that. Like they might have recalled you like maybe doing like some beat stuff, but you've been
Miller casting at some point.
Sure, I can definitely understand that one. But you've been doing this like hard grinding since like early 2016, right?
Yeah, early 2016, maybe like summer, I think is what I settled on.
Okay.
I can't really like recall a hard date. I could probably look one up, but I would say like late summer is when I probably started, maybe as late as August or something. But yeah, 2016, basically just started jumping in with my co-caster at the time, Storm, who we both were casting Guild Wars 2. He was my co-caster for the Guild Wars 2 stuff and the LAN events that we had with ESL. And he ran Academy Gaming. It was effectively just a weekly for what we consider at the time to be tier 2. Now, most people would say that that was tier 3.
Right.
Obviously, it was a little harder to have structure back then because, you know, we didn't have Overwatch League. We didn't have Contenders. And It's hard to define that kind of stuff back then. But, you know, a lot of really, really solid talent came from there. I mean, I still kind of converse with some of the players that have gone through Academy Gaming, you know, guys that came through, you know, the Hammers, all of the Hammers esports teams pretty much existed in Academy Gaming. So if you know Jake, Super, Avast, you know, all those guys, Avast less so because he joined that team quite a bit later, actually, in late 2016. I think December 2016 is when he actually joined that roster. But I would say Academy Gaming definitely set me up for some success because it was a really, really cool community, you know, being able to talk to and hang out with and all that with some of these players that at the time were considered, you know, amateur up and comers that are now, you know, in OWL or in Contenders and doing, you know, really, really cool things. I think Academy Gaming was a big part of why I'm probably even still doing this.
I think one of my first big articles was about the old like Bird Noises transition into Hammers esports, and I remember literally quoting you and Storm in that article. So again,
really,
yeah. I remember like I'm like, oh, okay, like these guys came from like TF2, and this is really cool, and like writing this out, and yeah, I linked back to the video, and yeah, I remember listening to that and citing that.
Oh no, was it the interview with Jake? Was it? Because we did an interview. Storm and I did an interview, I think, for Rivalcade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of our first pieces of content that we decided to push out. And please do not search it on YouTube because it is terrible. Please do not go look at it. It's so bad. But I believe this was, I could be mistaken, but I think this is the actual first interview that Jake ever did.
I think so.
And I remember, you know, back then I was basically just spotting out any kind of talent that I could see. You know, people that I thought were going to be going places and just, you know, either posting something about them on Twitter or like saying things with, you know, the network that AG created, so that these players can get some of the hype that they probably deserve, the spotlight that they deserve. Obviously, I didn't have the following to provide that kind of spotlight, certainly back then, but, you know, even now. But still, I wanted to do something. And Bird Noises was a team that was like definitely up and coming. And I had spoken to Jake a couple of times, and we did that interview, and I actually recently brought up, I still have the notes from that
Really?
interview.
Wow.
I still have them. They're on my Google Drive, and I brought them up, and there's a ton of stuff. That's actually why I was able to recall Avast's join date like so easily, because I just looked at it like pretty recently. But yeah, I think that was first.
I think so.
First that Jake had.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because I remember like him talking about like his philosophy background and like going to school and then dropping out.
Yeah, he was literally in his dorm.
Yeah,
when we did the interview. So
yeah, just a fun piece of trivia there. I thought that was really interesting, kind of fun. But yeah, you've been doing this for like an extremely long time. Like when you first, okay, so let me ask you this: when did you first kind of know that Overwatch was going to be the next game? Like, why did it kind of trump Heurix this time?
Ooh, open beta. Beta because I was moving from one apartment to another at that time, and because this was early-ish 2016, right? Open beta.
Something like
that. So I moved apartments, and I was told that this game was going to be pretty cool. Someone that I knew had access to it kind of earlier, so we went over to his house just to check out. He's like, you got to check this game out. It was actually someone I worked with DPS, who was that group that I went over to, you know, their big mansion, you know, for Guild Wars 2. I was still friends with them at the time, still kind of am actually friends with this guy in particular, at least. He was like, you know, you got to come over. You got to check this game out. I love this character, Roadhog. You know, like, it's so sick. It's such a cool game. And I went over there. We had some beers. We played the game a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I really want to try this out. Next open beta is like either a weekend or like a week long or something like that. And I was like, I got to try this out. But I'm moving house, and I'm hopefully going to be able to have internet in time. Well, didn't wind up having internet in time. No. And I was like, you know, I still want to try it out. I'm just going to, you know, 4G tether just for a little bit, just to see. I wound up 4G tethering to the sum of about, I would definitely over $1,000.
Wow.
Over the course of that week, just playing this game. However, I will say that I didn't have to pay that. It was actually a fault of the company that was providing the internet service. So they actually just paid everything. So
it's all good.
Otherwise, I would not have done that. I'm not that irresponsible. But yeah, I wound up playing it in open beta, and I was like, I got to get into this, whether it be playing it, coaching it because of my coaching background in Guild Wars 2, or maybe even giving casting a try. But I knew that I at least wanted to get an idea of the strategy and the macro concepts and some of the mechanics that go on within the game before I got into casting, because my background is color, and I wanted to have that information prior to just jumping in blindly. So probably open beta, would be when I was like, you know what, this is going to be a thing. So
the almost the truest OG. I mean, closed was still pretty difficult to get into for whatever reason. Like, I have terrible luck with Blizzard, like alpha codes and this, that, the other thing. I have a friend who literally gets all of them. Like, he I don't know how many times I had to run this kid through a number of dungeons because his account would get hacked because he was fish botting, and then he was speed botting, and he would just get unbanned. He's like, oh yeah, my roommate did it. And he just keeps getting like alpha codes and beta codes. Like, he got to try StarCraft. I'm like, what the? But I got Overwatch, so I was okay with that. I was like, all right, yeah, I got Overwatch. Yeah. It was all good. But going into casting and working with Storm, do you guys actually still stay in touch?
Very infrequently, I would say. He definitely, we basically had that fork in the road where he went on one path and I went on the other. He went kind of behind the scenes doing a great job over at Battlefy. I think he's the partnership programs manager there.
Awesome.
So
good for him.
He's doing really cool things over at Battlefy, and that's a really cool company. We did a lot with Battlefy, with AG. So we had a really good connection with them, and especially Storm in particular, because he was doing pretty much all of the admin work by himself, and then I was effectively running the broadcast. So we kind of separated things like that. But yeah, he's doing really cool things. We don't really talk as much because of how different we're of what we're doing now. But yeah, I would say ever so occasionally we still chat. Awesome. I still, when things are happening for him, I'm liking his stuff on Twitter and sending him a message. Hope things are going well. He does the same for me as well.
So that's good. That's good. Different ecosystems, different friend groups. Of course, people drift apart, but I'm happy that at least you guys are still in touch. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And transitioning into what you're kind of doing now, a little bit, at least progressing down the path. Most people probably either know you from like the super old days, as to which kudos to you for being OGs, but doing the
Happy you're still around.
Well, true. Now you and Lemon Kiwi and all these people at Broadcast GG are doing, Contenders for South America, and you guys, you've really started to kind of come into your own. Like, what's been the evolution from doing these weekly tournaments in 2016 for, 5 to 10 viewers? I know, this podcast, again, there's like 2 or 3 people that watch it. So, I definitely feel that pain, but what's the progress been there? How's that been?
So, we got really lucky actually at one point. So Rivalcade was a company that came in and wanted to do Overwatch stuff. We effectively were kind of bouncing around different community tournaments. We did some like Realm events, which I'm gonna put them on blast. They still haven't paid us. And they just vanished. Classic esports, I guess. But yeah, if you know anybody from Realm, hit me up, because we've got words to exchange. But moving from there, we had a lot of different community tournaments that we wound up doing that were really cool. Really liked working with a lot of those people. We were able to then have like a little deal with Realm, or at least not Realm, at least Storm hooked up with Rivalcade a little bit, worked with Joshy through that.
Sure.
Kind of roped me in later on. But I think our first big break was when Pit Season 1 came around. And they were going to have this big qualifier for it. And it was going to be, one of the bigger tournaments at the time, certainly one for, the amateur side of things, where a lot of those teams were getting their first big crack at being able to be, toe-to-toe with some of the other big names that were out there. And the qualifier, we heard, was not going to be streamed. So Storm and I were like, well, what could it hurt? We'll just go ahead and send an email out to Pit and the organizers and just see, hey, you mind if we just cast the qualifier? We'll do it for free. We just, want something to cast. And they came back and they said, well, we have someone doing the EU qualifier, which turned out was actually Brunch, who I worked on Pit Season 2 and Season 3 with. didn't know him at all at the time, but they were like, we don't have anybody for NA. You guys can do it free of charge, you know, haha. But we'll effectively let you do it and we won't pay you for it, but you can go for it.
Right.
So we did it. I think it went pretty well, and they turned around. They had Beyond the Summit actually doing the hiring for Pit Season 1. And LD actually messaged us and was like, hey, you want to jump in for Season 1? We need some more casters. You guys can come in and we'll, you know, be able to mix it up. Wound up casting alongside, you know, Joshy, Sideshow. I don't think Bryn was actually in Pit Season 1, but definitely, you know, like guys like Sideshow and stuff like that were involved, and it was really cool to be able to cast with people of that caliber at that stage as well. So Pit Season 1, definitely our first big break. Wound up casting Rivalcade Rumbles after that, which I think still to this date is my biggest concurrent viewership. I think we capped out at like 32,000, 34,000.
Really? That's crazy.
So that was a big tournament at the time for sure. And I think a lot of people see me and they think Pit or Contenders South America, but definitely Rivalcade Rumble was the biggest event in terms of peak concurrency and broadcasting that I think I've done to date. And maybe we'll break that soon, but for now that's where it lies. But yeah, Pit, Rivalcade Rumble, Contender South America, and Academy Gaming I think would be my effective brand in terms of the tournaments that I've covered.
Why do I remember you in Atlantic City? Was there a LAN?
Rivalcade Rumble.
Is that okay? I wasn't sure. I was like, I remember you and Storm. Yeah, I kind of like a very dark LAN. That was the one thing I remember. The lighting was just very dim.
Yeah, so Atlantic City, if you are not privy to the history of this city, it is effectively they call it like the Vegas of the East, essentially. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out like Vegas, and things are... The city itself looks very much like the stream did. I mean, it's very dreary and very kind of sad. A lot of the businesses, a lot of the casinos have moved on. It just didn't work out as well as, you know, Las Vegas did. Sure. And they're trying to revive it. There's a big revival, like Renaissance thing going on right now in Atlantic City, and part of that was trying to bring in, you know, this to see if the esports scene would be able to thrive there, perhaps. And part of this was bringing in Rivalcade, and they wanted to do a tournament out of this hotel that they were going to renovate. And it's this, I will say, it is beautiful, this hotel. I mean, it was built for millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it looks the part. And they were renovating it. They wanted to host a convention for like gaming and like anime and stuff like that. I want to say. So yeah, we had a tournament, and it was in their, I guess, like theater or like concert hall or something like that. Yeah, it was something like that. We actually had the voice actors for Sombra and Symmetra. Very cool. So I got to interview both of them. That was a really cool experience. But yeah, it was effectively in like, I think we can call it a concert hall or like a theater hall, or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, it was very dark, and they said, hey, we're gonna pay you pretty well, but you have to have the brand, and that means wearing this polo. So we wore, I think ZP called it the Home Depot shirt. Like, he was sending me a DM, and he was like, hey, you should probably wear like a button up. And I'm like, look, they're paying me decent money. I'm going to wear what they want me to wear. But he was like, you guys are sporting like the Home Depot shirt. And it was just like a black polo with like the Home Depot orange Rivalcade logo on it, and it did not look good, but hey, they were paying, so whatever. Gotta
suit up, gotta stay in uniform, I suppose. I do very much remember that. I can't say that I watched the whole thing, I'll be completely honest. I don't remember watching the entire event, but I definitely remember.
It was long.
Yeah,
it was long.
I can imagine so, but I mean, it sounded like everything kind of went off without a hitch. Got paid, the event was, you know, dark, but still good.
I think the worst part was just getting there, because I remember driving there. So I live in like the DC area.
Sure.
For anybody that's looking to find me, you won't. So don't worry about that. But the DC area, we'll call it. But going from there to Atlantic City is a lot of back roads. And what that means is, of course, not very lit back roads. And I was driving there after I would say like 6 p.m. and it was like it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive, something along those lines, maybe less than that. Because after 6 p.m. you don't have as much traffic in DC, so I think it was only like 3 or 4 hours. But either way, it was back roads and it was raining super hard and it was already dark at night and it was so scary to drive to Atlantic City, like in the pitch black darkness in back roads of like farm towns and stuff like that, and you have no idea where anything is, and you're going through like winding roads and it looks like roads just straight end because the road drops. So that was a daunting experience. I would say probably the worst part about that experience, but everything else was great, I would have to say, to be honest.
That's good.
Despite the look of the stream and everything.
I mean, once you got in game, it was just the only thing, the one thing that I can remember is like Heurix Storm. Yeah. I liked their casting. It was just kind of dark. And I do remember the polos. I will say I remember the polos and the banners in the back. Yep. Like these kind of weird streamers.
I forgot about the banners. Yeah, we definitely had the banners too. Yeah. Well,
gotta do what you gotta do to get paid.
I also had to set up the stream. I remember this. I don't know why I forgot about this. I actually had to set up that stream about probably less than an hour before we actually went live, because they had this mixer, and they were trying to get the microphones to work because we were going to be doing the interview for the voice actors or voice actresses, whatever they prefer. I don't know, whatever. For the interview, and they had these headsets that weren't working, and they found out, I went over to the mixer. I was like, hey, you only have 2 inputs. That's for my mic and Storm's mic. Yeah. So you guys need to figure something else out. And they were like, okay, well, we can buy a mixer, like run to a store and like buy a mixer and like get this sorted. And I'm like, well, we have about no time left, so that's not happening. So I effectively reconfigured their entire like mixer setup and all of their audio, and we actually had luckily sponsored like Razer headsets that they gave us to just put like on the table. And I was like, well, we're using these now. I pulled them over and we had the headsets into my computer for the spectator cam and Storm's computer for the other spectator cam, and we ran it through Discord and it sounded awful, but we used it anyways.
Hey, you know what? You gotta work on the fly. You gotta work with what you got. It is pretty funny. So you're telling me the sponsored Razer boxes are just completely empty because you had to set it up for the interview?
Yeah. Completely empty. The keyboards were even. I mean, we used everything that they sponsored. Everything that they were like, hey, throw these out. We were using them. They worked great. So I guess hey, kudos to Razer.
There you go. Products work.
Yeah, why not? If they're right there, use them, right?
Exactly. Now, from that, we transition into South America, which you and the South American crew have been very passionate about. I can't stress that enough. These guys have been like super about South America. We still have to have this weird like Chinese versus South American contenders like show match at some point. I don't know if it'll ever happen. We keep kind of talking around it, but sooner or later, I'm sure it'll happen. But talk to me a little bit about South American contenders. I hear there's a super team kind of forming, so give me a brief history of South American contenders and your involvement.
Okay, so for South America as a region, the story has always been Brazil Gaming House, even dating back to early 2017. It's always been about Brazil Gaming House. BGH actually wound up doing a couple of little stints in North American tournaments, I think, with like the Alienware monthly melees. So it was probably the only team that anybody ever really knew anything about, and for a good reason, because they were the best team in the region for a long time, alongside another team called Heurix Gaming. A lot of storied history between those two organizations, but season 2 was very much along that narrative of Heurix versus Brazil Gaming House. They wound up in season 3 deciding, alongside a lot of other players, that hey, buyouts are a thing. So we need to make sure that we don't have any, so that we have our best shot at actually getting into an academy team or an Overwatch League team, which are obviously the targets for anybody in the Overwatch ecosystem. Sure. And they made their own team, Base Tryhards, wound up losing to a team called LFT Owl, which was just a ragtag group from these two teams that only made it to quarterfinals last year. They were like 7th, 8th place, or 5th through 8th place last season in season 2. got completely demolished, and now we have a new team because of players, going different directions. Two of their BGH players wound up going to Uprising Academy. That's Alamong and Klaus, respectively. Had to make sure I got it in the right order. But yeah, because of all this movement and all this stuff going on in the South American region, and a lot of these other teams really on the come up and kind of catching up to where BGH was, or rather BTH, now we have a lot of really solid teams and a super team called Loki Esports, which is players from Brazil Gaming House and players from LFT Owl, the grand finalists from season 3. So you got Muri's, Lico, Fasty, Honorado, Ule, and Pizza Lover, and the coaches of both teams. So you've got a literal powerhouse dominant force. And I actually did tweet about this recently, that this is a really good move. And it's, a lot of people looked at this as kind of like I'll use the term like cutthroat kind of play, where it's like, okay, you're going to take the 2 best teams that nobody had a chance of beating, take all of like the best pieces and just mash them up into one team. How are we ever going to compete? Well, hey, look, you've got this new system coming through for Contenders in 2019, and you have the show match coming up. If you want the best hope for your region to be able to at least have a shot at competing in the gauntlet, or have a shot at making a name for your region, you need the absolute best of the best to be able to make that kind of bold statement. And you only have one shot, because South America in the Eastern Showdown has one team. You've just got one shot. So it has to be a good shot, and Loki Esports seems like the best team to do it.
And with super teams, they tend to either be incredibly dominant, which are probably a small percentage of like all of like the super teams across like traditional sports and even esports and whatever competitive facet there is. But most of them tend to fall on their face. So there's a very good chance that some like another ragtag, South American team comes out and they just have this huge upset, which, how awesome of a story is that?
Yeah.
Now you're going to the showdown and competing for your region. I definitely understand where people are coming from when they say cutthroat and very aggressive. I totally understand that. But like you're saying, it's very good in the long run. You build up your region, you build up notoriety. Hell, Sao Paulo, maybe in the Overwatch League. Who knows?
Yeah.
8 teams this year. Why not 8 more teams next year, And South America needs some representation, so who knows?
Pretty crazy expansion if they get 8 more for next year. But yeah, who knows? You never know. And I don't think that low-key would be a team that winds up getting upset. Sure. There's certainly a lot of really good talent, but I think the issue is that this team isn't just, really solid players that are coming together. These are players that have known each other for a really long time. They've played with each other before, way back in the past. I mean, a lot of the players on both of those teams, LFT Owl and Base Tryhards, have a lot of history together. I mean, pretty much everybody on one roster has at least played with 2 to 3 others on the other at some point or another. So they have really storied histories together. It's not something that I think they're going to have any tremendous problem meshing. And they also have 2 of probably the better coaches, if not the best coaches in the region, to back them up simultaneously. So Loki Esports should be a pretty dominant team, and should be the team that does go to Showdown in June, I believe.
I can't wait for that. Did a podcast earlier with
I will say,
go ahead.
I will say before we move on from that, because I do think this is very important to mention, and I want it to be on something that isn't just BGG. Trid, caster for EU, did say that if an SA team in the Showdown beats an EU team, he will do a form of a shoey. And what we settled on eventually is that he's going to allow every player from probably low-key esports, but whatever SA team winds up making it, to basically fountain a double gin and tonic from shoe to shoe to shoe to shoe all the way down, and he will take a shoey of a double gin and tonic through basically a fountain effect of everybody on that South American team's shoes.
What is up with South America and doing shoeys? It's just, is that the bet?
South America. It's okay. So it's an Australian thing.
Of course.
It started, of course, with Uber. And then I think basically just where it ran from there was that there was that grind podcast where everybody was talking about it. And Ham Tornado wound up saying that if Based, why I think it was that if Based loses, she would do a Shui. So that's effectively how we got from there to where we are now, where Trid is going to have to go from 6 different shoes, a double gin and tonic. And I feel for him because there's a possibility, man. This is a good team. This is a really good team. And I think it's going to really, I think they're going to make an impact more so than a lot of people expect, even considering how good I know the North American and European talents to be. I mean, those are really, really solid teams, but I still think South America is going to be able to make an impact there. There's
always one Brazilian or South American team that comes up in an esport that's like the leader in the region that will take games, and it's not a betting man's game, but
yeah, there was a time when people didn't think that SK Gaming and CSGO was going to be that great. And all of a sudden, look where they are. So
it's definitely a possibility. I wouldn't say I'd bet on it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a possibility. You know, they have very good players.
Yeah, the thing that I've said the most now, I would say, is that before it was they would have had a chance at maybe taking a couple of maps off the top teams and stuff. Because here's the thing. You're talking about the top of each region. Exactly. And Contenders, you're talking about, from North America, you're talking about academy teams that are likely going to be the teams that actually wind up making it. You're talking about, you know, your Fusion universities, your Atlanta academies, these teams that have been pretty strong for the last, you know, well, maybe not Atlanta is the case here, but at least like, you know, talking about Fusion University, your Gigantes, teams of that caliber that you're going to be putting this team up against. Yes, it's hard to believe that they're going to be able to do very much against them. But with this new roster, with this Loki Esports roster that was announced, they at least now have a pretty good shot at doing something. I don't know what it's going to be, and I wouldn't bet on it either way, because I feel like either way I'm going to lose money. But but hey, I think that they have at least a good shot now, and I think that's what's most important for this region to be able to claim, hey, we're not far behind, because I think that's the impression that a lot of people have, is that South America, you know, China, these regions are very, very far behind the rest. And I think this is a good time for a lot of these regions to make a bold statement and say, hey, we're not actually that far behind. In fact, we might be able to even beat you guys here and there.
It's going to be it's going to be a more competitive version of the World Cup in my eyes, where, you know, you still get that regional pride where it's like, I'm rooting for the team from NA and I'm rooting for the team from EU, and, you know, we'll have, you know, words there. But at the end of the day, this is amazing for the players, because they can really come in and showcase what the team has to offer on a you know, an offline environment to a large audience. You know, what's to hate there?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I think something that will help South America too is that these players in particular, I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that all of them do have LAN experience too. And that can be something that helps them as well. I mean, I think for a majority of the teams that they're going to be playing against from NA and EU will have the same thing, but it certainly won't be something that hurts them, which is, I think, a boon, because a lot of people may not know that they have that LAN experience, whether it be from playing in Overwatch World Cup or some of the Brazilian tournaments that have had LAN experiences, even as recently as, I think, September, October of last year.
Before we jump off of South America, let me pose you this hypothetical. If the Showdown was applied to last season of Contenders, and you sent, who was it? Who won South America? LFT, and you send them to face Gigante and Fusion University, and I think Atlanta, because I think we get 2 or 3, I don't remember. Anywho, but like, if it was added last year, do you think South America has a shot?
No.
I respect the honesty.
I don't think that LFT has the ability to take on a Fusion University. I don't think LFT has the ability to take on, you know, like a Gigante or something like that. In that current state. I think that with their current roster, they can build into a team that has a shot. And I think that's the best way, the most optimistic way that I could leave it. But again, I think that shouldn't take away from how much that they've accomplished and what they're capable of, because when we're talking about your Gigantes and your Fusion Universities, you're talking about in my opinion, at least, outside of like Korea Contenders, the 2 best I guess you could say like farm ups for being able to pull players that are Overwatch League caliber. I mean, Fusion University has some fantastic players that they've drummed up. I mean, guys like Alarm are going to be names. That's going to be a name that we're going to be talking about for years and years and years, as long as Overwatch is going. Guys like Elk, I think, are going to have an even bigger impact coming into 2019. You're going to be looking at him probably making an impact on Philadelphia Fusion as a whole. So those are really, really high level players that you're talking about. Who Are You is another big name. Giganti has pushed pretty much everybody that they've ever had on their roster outside of Davin to Overwatch League. Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about some really high quality talent that I don't think that LFT Owl or BTH could have competed with in 2018. But in 2019, where things are headed, I think there's a possibility that they could contend with them. I don't think that they would dominate in any shape of the word.
That's perfectly fair enough. And again, I respect the honesty, because it's very nice and it's very fun to just go on brand and be like, no, you know what, South America's gonna come out with that crazy flair, and they're gonna pull out something fancy. So again,
I love South America though, man. Like you mentioned it before that we have like this passion. We definitely do. I mean, it's definitely something that you fall into, and you can easily. It's very easy to fall in love with these guys because you talk to them and they're so like they have like those really big eyes and everything. Still, like they really want it. Like they're very passionate about it. They're very into it. They're always trying to improve, and they have these these great storylines. Guys like Edgigus that are out there as well. Anybody that follows South America will know his storyline. I mean, a young kid, kind of like that Sugar Free effect. Where, it's just this young kid, incredibly talented, but also Edgigus has this like absolutely magnificent attitude, like just great personality, super nice guy. And really, that's the kind of thing that I think is easy to fall in love with South America. And it takes away from what some people might expect from what is a heavily Brazilian region, and what I think a lot of people think about Brazilian gamers and everything. And it's truly a really quality region. I really love South America as a whole, and everybody that's covered South America feels the same way.
It does. From what I've heard, it's very, very charming. And again, you're kind of in a weird, selfish way. You're kind of like scouring through the diamonds in the rough, and you can kind of like have a region you call your own and you're an expert in. But the players are super interesting and super nice, and they have all these really cool stories. So I can totally understand how you just fall in love and you put these players up there and you just wish them nothing but the best. And talking about like with what Boston's kind of scouted with, some of their what can we expect? Is this were these good moves? Because I can't say that I put them too highly, but again, I'll be eating crow if Huck proves me wrong. But give me a little backstory.
I think Huck as a GM or president of gaming, he does well to take risks in that fashion. And if we do wind up talking about Overwatch League, then maybe I can talk about it more. But I will say that going through, I think, who was it? It must have been maybe like Bench Mob or something. Use the term going through the bargain bin. I think that was Bench Mob. I could be wrong.
Probably. It sounds like Halo Dave.
I think it was Dave, but he described it as going through the bargain bin, and Huck's been known to do that, and it paid off to a degree in season 1. I don't know if it's going to work out for season 2. I'm a little skeptical. They still have Kelix on the roster. Alamang would be someone that I would definitely be playing for sure in the Lucio role. I mean, mechanically, he's a very solid talent. People are going to see an Owl when he does get playtime, and he will get playtime. Just what he's capable of, because he is a really, really solid talent. It's just about, making sure that he has everything else, the intangibles, things that you don't see on the broadcast. But Alamang, very solid talent. Klaus, I think, was pretty much an undisputed, top 1 or 2 DPS in the South American region. Very, very solid talent. If worked into a very good system, I think that he would excel. kind of in the same capacity as like Fleta in Soul Dynasty, where it's like you have this really, really solid player. If only there was a good system, you know?
I can't tell if you're pandering or not. Heurix, I'm not sure. But you're selling me on this Klaus kid.
Not a pander, but I truly believe that. I think Klaus is a really solid talent that in time will I think certainly flourish. And there are definitely players like him in South America that are yet to be discovered.
Awesome. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the next transition in your career, right? You know, moving to Elo Hell. I don't know if you're completely full-time with them and you're doing other projects. I have no idea. That's something you can describe. But kind of explain how it's been working with them, you know, some of the stuff you guys have up and coming. I know there's big things coming through the grapevines, people. No leaks, but be excited. I will say that. Be very excited. But, you know, how's it been working with Jane and the crew?
Really good. So interestingly, I mostly worked with BGG over like the last 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Ever since Pit, I went out to Croatia actually to do Pit season 3. Beautiful city called Split, beach city and everything. Got to hang out on the beach and go out. They took really good care of us and everything. Awesome. But coming back, I was like, okay, I need to find something stable. Wound up getting into South America, and that's kind of how I got my start with BGG, doing something with them very consistently.
Sure.
Then through that, I wound up working with Lemon Kiwi. We became a duo, and we decided, hey, we want to work together. And I would say over the next couple of months, we worked together, and then eventually we decided, hey, this is working out. You know, why don't we really push this? Why don't we really push the envelope? Why don't we take ourselves to that next level? Why don't we put in the time and the effort and everything that's needed to make sure that we actually get to the next stage where we want to go, whatever our goal may be. At the time, Lemon Key was also pushing a lot of content for Overwatch Contenders Daily with Kick Tripod, who you obviously have a pretty good relationship with. And I was doing stuff for Owl Daily a couple of times there too. So she was doing that. I think Jane wound up finding her through either that or through the broadcasts of BGG and pulled her in for head of content or something like that, head of channel manager. There we go, nailed it. I should know this, being her friend and duo partner, but whatever. But yeah, got pulled into Elo Hell, and it wasn't actually something that I was a part of, and they wound up doing some tournaments. Jane getting started with the Dallas Fuel stuff. He unfortunately couldn't make some of the events because he got pulled into, a scrim here or a meeting there. And then when he moved to LA, he was also super sick. So I definitely feel for the guy, and he's been nothing but truly, genuinely a nice guy the entire time that I've been doing stuff with Elo Hell. And basically, I just kind of got pulled in as a last minute sub for like a couple of broadcasts, and then we wound up being able to get pulled in full time for NA Trials, which just started last weekend, and we're now moving into some more broadcasts there. And yeah, we have I would say Elo Hell has some stuff that's coming in down the pipeline that people should definitely be excited for. Definitely. Again, no leaks. But between Broadcast GG, between some other third parties, and of course Elo Hell really pushing the envelope both in production value and with what they're capable of doing for the T2 and T3 scenes. There is some exciting stuff that I'm really, everybody should have their eyes emojis out for
very much
next,
very much in
4 or 5 months or so.
Yes, a lot of eyes emojis on the Elo Hell. So if you're not following them now, and I'm not trying to shill, Jane, if you're out there, I like what you're doing. I'm not hunting for a contract, buddy, but I know what's going on in community. Be amped, be excited. There's news, there's news a coming. I'll say that much. But to flex seal the weird leak we've got kind of sprung here in a second. You mentioned previously you have like this history in coaching and even as a player, high rated on the ladder. Is there an itch to really start working with teams? Is there like a player inside of you? It's like, oh man, Apex, this new BR. I don't know, man. I might go in.
Well, okay. So I definitely have played every time I do something, I take it probably too seriously.
Okay.
It's why I wind up going color and going into that every single time, because I just want to know everything about the game.
Sure.
So back in Guild Wars 2, I was, one of the top level players on the ladder when they actually had one for the 5v5. I was one of the top level players when they had the GVG. PUBG came out. I was in top 200 every single time that I played one of their seasons alongside my friend Corn Pops, who was, I think, top like 20 a couple of seasons. We got into playing Blackout and just the regular multiplayer for Call of Duty. Corn Pops was like, I think like fourth, like literally like score per minute, number 4 in the world across all platforms. And I love playing games with that guy, and we take things probably way too seriously and try super hard. My win rate right now in Apex Legends is like 90%. We've played like 40 games. I think we've only lost like 2. So yeah, I'm really enjoying playing it. I like winning, but I don't think that I would make a good player. I could probably pull off coaching, just because I like the strategy concept and everything. But I will say Overwatch has always been and continues to be the hashtag one love. I always go back to Overwatch. I never even really take time off of Overwatch. So as far as other games go, it's things that I'm interested in, things that I have my own hashtag eye emojis on. But Overwatch remains the one love, and probably will remain the one love for quite some time. I don't see myself ever getting burnt out or ever losing any passion or drive for this game. I just love it so much.
At times I can be pretty cynical about the Overwatch community. There are things that happen and I'm just like, shaking my head. I'd rather just be asleep. Just get me out of here. I need a break. And hearing the passion that people like you and people at Broadcast UG and some of the other content creators that I've kind of met through the couple years that I've been doing this full time, I hold that on for dear life sometimes, man. Like it's rough out there sometimes, and you hear things and things happen, and I'm just like, oh man, if this community wasn't cool in certain aspects, I don't know if I could do this. I just want to go back to being a fan sometimes, or just like put the blinders on and just enjoy stuff. Because it's rough at times.
I mean, I can't say that it hasn't been tough a few times, especially where you consider what casters at this tier have been doing for like the last year and a half. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have opportunities that a lot of other people haven't had. Like being able to go out to Croatia and get paid doing it. But if you're not in contenders, it's very, very tough, and there have been moments where it has been a struggle to say, hey, can I continue even doing this? Or do I need to at least do something as well to be able to continue to do this? So yeah, there's been tough times and there's been struggles, but overall, I wouldn't trade it. I still think that this is the game that I want to continue to dig into, and the game that I have the most passion for out of any other game that I've been involved with. And I don't see that ever quitting anytime soon.
Oh, you big man, you. With that passion, I know that we're all excited. We got roughly, exactly a week before Owl Season 2 starts up. The Overwatch League is finally coming back. Shoot, I remember back when we were like
countdown 2 days.
Community countdown. I would have liked a preseason, but it's not content for me. Everybody excited.
We're getting scrims. We're getting scrims.
We all know what we think about scrims here, right? We all know the scrim.
We all know what we saw with the free season too. But
exactly. Hey, you know what? Boston almost lost to Shanghai. I'm just saying. How serious were people taking it? Fusion didn't even show up. Preseason aside, you like on a paintball. You like 6v6 with the streamers. It's not content for me specifically. That's cool. I like it. Gives people jobs, gets people out there. I like it. The community hopefully will like it. It'll be fun. But, I'm going to be reserved for day one when I see the NYXL play London Spitfire, and maybe hands will be thrown. I don't know. Just saying. But where's your power rankings? Who do we got coming out on top? What are your thoughts with these teams?
Okay, so I drew some up privately. Probably about a week and a half ago because I saw Tactical Crouch
Sure.
put some out with the three of you. And then I saw everybody was putting them out, and I was like, I wonder where I would place a lot of these teams. So I just put the blinders on. I didn't use anybody's as reference or anything
Sure.
like that. I just looked at the rosters, did a little bit of research myself, and
Mm-hmm.
then after I was done, kind of compared. And I have some things that are slightly different.
Yeah. What's the big differences?
So I think so. One thing I did with mine, I also rated them for volatility.
Sure.
In terms of where they're at versus where they could be at.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the teams that stood out to me as particularly volatile in terms of where a lot of people put them and where I put them and where they could be, in between or either direction, are the Spark. I rated them quite a bit higher than a lot of other teams, or a lot of other analysts.
Yeah.
And I would say the most volatile team, which is not volatile for the reason of being inherently volatile, like a lot of people think, is the Atlanta Reign.
Yes.
I think Atlanta Reign is going to be a team that could fall anywhere in like 6th to like 16th. It could be anywhere in there. And honestly, I think stage 1 is like a really good stage for them. I mean, you look at their lineup, they have what I think it goes Mayhem, which they should win. Let's be realistic. Then they have Fusion, which
could be tough depending on what Reign we see. Could be tough, could be interesting. We'll see what happens with Fusion, but yeah, continue.
And then they go on to play Defiant, who have at that stage, that will be that'll be Defiant's second game. So they'll still be on the suspension of Neko in that. So they won't have him. And they'll be effectively, at least currently, be playing 2 main supports to be able to play through that game, if I'm not mistaken. So then they move on to Eternal, which they should win. I even went as far as to look at the actual maps that they're going to be playing, because those are just actually released, I believe, yesterday or the day before. Like that, So Reign versus Eternal was Ilios, which should be winnable for them. Should be okay. Hollywood, probably a 50-50, I would say.
Yeah, definitely have some goats in there for sure.
Yeah, and it's because of the goats, the proficiency that Eternal are going to be able to bring that out with very early on. Cruz, Ben Best. I would say Cruz and Ben Best are the biggest reasons why I believe in their ability to do well with goats.
I would agree.
But then we come into that assault game type. Things can be very wild there. I expect Reign to be able to win that one. We'll see.
Could be scrappy.
And then, but Route 66 is going to be a big yikes. Who knows? Maybe they play like a DPS comp or something like that. But with how well I expect Eternal to be able to understand the macro game of the Goats comp, for Route 66, I think that could be a big yikes for Atlanta Reign. But at least they should have a chance at being able to go 3-1 in the map score there, and they might be able to beat Eternal. But then you play the Gladiators next, and that probably will be a loss. But hey, you've got Hunters and Outlaws right after that. You could go 5-2 in stage 1.
It's definitely a possibility.
Possible.
In the way that you had, I think it was very astute to mark and kind of grade the teams. For the podcast that I do with Yiska and Kick Tripod Tactical Crouch, we had settled on like a strict 1 to 20, just be bold. But I did actually grade the teams, who are my championship level teams, who are my like contenders who might be able to happen, like who are my dark horses and who are the volatile teams. And I did have Atlanta Reign. I didn't have Spark because I think X6 Gaming's had enough time for me to kind of flesh out, even though they have the Chinese players who, again, I still don't think we'll see playtime, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
I had Dallas Fuel, I had Atlanta Reign, I think I had Fusion as like my volatile teams that could like really peak really hard one stage and then they kind of drop down. So I definitely see where you're coming from.
One of the other ones too. And I would say the other team that could be like maybe not as high of a ceiling as I expect Reign to perhaps have, but certainly that kind of same range would be a team like Toronto Defiant, that I guess battle for black and red, as it were. But Toronto Defiant, once they bring Neko back in, if they can bounce back from that, I don't remember their stage 1 opponents. I think coming out of stage 1, they'll be in a rough spot because they do have the games against Spark and Valiant and NYXL that, and then as well Atlanta Reign with Neko out. So that's 4 games that they probably won't win if I'm just like basing it off of intuition and throwing out conjecture right now. That's 4 games that they probably won't win. So maybe they end that stage like 2-5, 3-4, something like that. But I think they should be able to bounce back after that. And then it's just a question of how well they'll do post stage 1, or if they can, hey, surprise us somehow in stage 1, you know, winning some of these other games, maybe versus, you know, Valiant or beating out the Spark or something like that.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to be clear because I enjoy marking Houston low. Houston is not a volatile team. I think they're just going to be, you know, pretty bad. I think that Fusion is where I think things could get messy. Houston, you know, got some history there. I respect you all as people. Just don't think your team is very good. You know, gotta be honest. You know,
I'll go ahead, and I'm not gonna have an opinion, but I will say that Houston Outlaws on my list is rated 15.
I mean, you know, definitely near where I put them. You know, I was a little bit more aggressive with mine, but you know,
I will say,
I understand.
I will say that they do have a remarkable synergy that I think a lot of other teams lack, and that could help them. Certainly stage 1, stage 2, I think that will help them. And they have a couple of matchups that I think would look good for them, certainly in stage 1 and stage 2. So, I mean, at least coming into like the halfway point, I think Houston Outlaws could look better than where they might wind up in the end of things. But hey, this is just the conversation that power rankings kind of develop.
Exactly.
You know?
And that's all they are. You know, again, this is just my, you know, everybody's anticipation, you know, what kind of, you know, astute opinions we might have on them. Again, look at how different things were with season 1. I'm sure we're all going to be very wrong about some of these teams come season 2. How, you know, Boston could end up being a top level team. And, you know, I'm going to have a handwritten letter given to Huck for all the shade. No, I mean, it's not shade, but it's just, you know, my opinion. And it just happens to butt heads with the Boston fans and how feverish they are about their bargain bin team, as Benjamin put it. But
yeah,
give me 2 teams. Give me your underrated team who think, you know, might be a dark horse, and give me the team who you think is a bubble waiting to be popped.
Well, I think 2 of the teams that I would bring into this are 2 teams that we've already mentioned. I think it just it depends, I guess.
Sure.
I would say Atlanta Reign is currently, by most people, being underrated. I think a lot of people put them outside of playoffs. I feel like they should be a playoffs team.
Okay.
I think Kodak and Masa are both
very good,
given nowhere near enough credit for how good they are.
Yeah.
I mean, Kodak is actually incredibly solid, and I think he'll be put at least in the same caliber as what some people were putting like Boombox in and everything like that going into season 1. Kodak is at least at that caliber, in my opinion.
Yep.
Masa, you're talking about one of the Giganti talent.
Yep.
Very, very solid player, very knowledgeable Lucio player, mechanically really, really solid, and also great knowledge of the game. And I think the person that everybody's going to be talking about, I think I saw something with you talking about this player in particular and what he's potentially capable of. But Erster is a guy that I think probably like around stage 2, people are going to have Reddit posts galore about Erster, because he has the potential to either be an okay, mediocre player or straight Carpe level, like straight up, like incredible player. And when you pair him alongside either of Inlayer or Defran, depending on what you want to play or who you want to play, because both of them are very, very talented. I think Erster is really going to shine, and certainly Pokpo and Dako are not lacking in any sort of ability. So there really isn't too many holes on this roster like you could see with other rosters, like maybe Valiant, Outlaws, stuff like that. Justice.
You know, you mentioned Justice, but, you know, as a, you know, DC-ish resident area, you know, is this a team you'll be pulling for? Are we going elsewhere? Are we, you know, exporting our fandom?
So I will say, for most of my life, I've been very much a hometown fan, you know, growing up in Florida. specifically the Tampa Bay area. I was accustomed to following the Tampa Bay teams. If you know anything about traditional sports, whether it be baseball, football, hockey, whatever, Tampa Bay hasn't had a great history in sports. We had a couple of really glorious moments, and finally now with hockey, at least we're doing pretty well there. But Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think, really, you could probably see the sadness in my face.
Oh, just trust me, really, dude. I'm from Detroit. Name a good team. They don't exist, right? So, kindred spirits.
So I would say the Buccaneers, or the Succaneers, if you would call them that, really messed me up. So when I wanted to get into soccer again a little bit, I looked at MLS. I was getting into a team that my friend put me onto. He's from Atlanta. So I do have a little bit of a desire to see Atlanta do well, just because I like Atlanta as a city, not because of, the roster that the Reign put out. It certainly helps that I like the roster, but I would say I'm looking at the Reign a little bit more than some of the other teams. But obviously I am a DC native. I am pulling for DC. I even, for the Overwatch League 2019 All Access Pass, they had the option to pick, your team or whatever. I did pick Washington Justice. I will say that they need to change their emoticons, because as it stands right now, the emoticon. I did hear that roster meme. We'll get to it. But right now on Twitch, it says, instead of saying like "justice is served," which is their motto or whatever, slogan, the way that they wrote it, it almost looks like it says "Jusser is Ticevid." So I thought it was hilarious. I feel like it just it follows the narrative that I think we're going to get with Washington Justice, which is essentially like scuff, like just straight scuff. I think that's probably going to be something that we're going to grow accustomed to. I felt like that was something that I really want to be a part of, so I went ahead and I was like, no, we're going for it, boys. Let's get this, But yeah, as a team, there are a couple guys on the roster that I really like. I really think that they could do well, given that they're in the right system and in the right meta. Fozix is a guy that I really hope does well. Stratus is a guy that I really hope does well. Followed him since his days in Prestige Worldwide into Rocket Esports. That was a team that, really busted out of T3. Right. But I don't know, the roster and what I'm hearing about the roster as well, in terms of, the results of what's going on behind the scenes, scrims, what have you. Obviously, that's a meme in and of itself, scrim results. But as it turns out, it doesn't seem as though they have a lot of scrim bucks in their bank account. So it doesn't seem like they're going to do that great. And on paper, it certainly makes sense why that might be the case. But I guess it's just one of those we'll have to wait and see. And I hope, at least for my local community's sake, that it does go well.
I wouldn't be too, afraid of the local community, because the Shanghai Dragons went 0-40
I just hope they don't come
season.
to my house with pitchforks.
Oh, I'm sure they won't. I think this will.
I really do hope they do well.
Sure, of course. And even if they don't, they'll be lovable. They'll be charming. Just the same way that Shanghai was, if they do indeed. I don't think they will be as bad as people expect, especially coming later on, as long as everything...
I have them higher than a lot of people actually do as well. I mean, pretty much everybody puts them at 20 or 19. Yes. I have them at 17, and I think the thing that hurts them the most is what people are going to see in Stage 1. Because what are their Stage 1 opponents?
Oh, it's disgusting. It's
disgusting. It's like, out of the 7 matches that they have, I think, at least 5 of them are in like everybody's top 6 in power rankings.
No chance you're ever gonna win that. Like, you maybe take a map and that's a victory.
They play what? NYXL, Spitfire, Gladiators, I think, Fusion. I think they play
Florida at some point.
Yeah, I think that's the one game that they have a really good shot. That's the last game. That's week 5, stage 1 is their game versus Mayhem, and I think that's the game that they'll be able to be like, oh, finally. But other than that, it's gonna be a tear for all of stage 1 for them, unfortunately. I do think though that they should be able to take a couple maps for sure. It's not going to be a Shanghai Dragons sort of situation, and I do think that once we do finally get out of stage 1, we will see them winning more matchups, and they should look a lot better. And I think you'll see them fall into a better position, a better one than a lot of people are expecting at the moment.
Yes. I completely agree with that. I think that just the strength of schedule will kind of jade people a lot. You know, oh, you will be, you know, you will see people citing this first stage as confirmation bias. Oh, we heard they were bad. They are bad. Look at how. But you have to take into consideration they're playing, you know, world champions.
Yeah, it's a trial by fire.
A little bit.
Their winnables are certainly the Mayhem and maybe the Eternal. That's gonna be a tough matchup. The maps for Eternal don't look good for them. It's like Busan, which is like Goat Central. You're going to lose. Kings Row, Goat Central. You're going to lose. I don't think the Assault map is even out because I think it was listed as Busan, Kings Row, Kings Row. So once we get that Assault map, you know, maybe that can be a winnable situation. But then you go into Dorado, and that I still think is kind of a yikes matchup for Justice, because you have two options there, at least given what is currently happening with the current meta. Obviously things could develop and things can change in that time, but you know, if it's goats, or if it's, you know, Winston goats or dive goats, whatever you want to call it, I still think Eternal has the upper hand there. If you do wind up going and trying to take Widow duels, you're talking about taking a Widow duel against someone like Soon. I'm sorry, but you don't win that. So, I mean, it's a tough matchup. I think their best bet is just taking the win versus Mayhem, looking good in their other matchups, taking some other maps, maybe upsetting someone along the line. Maybe one of those volatile teams out there. We'll have to see how Dynasty actually winds up looking as well. But they have some shots, and then just hope to keep morale high for stage 2.
Yes, I think that's the big thing that they have to keep in mind, is like, you cannot have mental boom. Even though you go into it expecting, you know, the worst with how difficult your stage 1, you know, strength of schedule is, players are a fickle bunch. You know, they're young kids. The second they start to just repeatedly lose, and when it's not even close, that's even worse. When you're just you're absolutely crushed. Like, if you can keep the morale high going into stage 2, I already consider that a victory, and you'll start to see them progress a lot farther off of the back of specifically Otto. Definitely a sleeper pick out there. Teams, I don't know what you're doing. You need to pick him up.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that they were able to snipe him, and that he was. I wonder what also the contract looks like for that one. I wonder if they were able to snipe him at a good price too, because it doesn't seem like a lot of their roster would have been particularly expensive. And I wonder if that was maybe, you know, one of the guys that they picked up that didn't have a high price tag as well, or if that was their high price tag. I mean, I would have to imagine that there were other offers on the table for a guy like that. I mean, Otto is a truly, really solid player that I think, again, a lot of people are going to continue to talk about.
Yeah, I think I will say you'll hear people talk about him, but it'll always be kind of that Fleta, that Klaus argument. You know, like, oh, well,
I hope not.
I honestly believe that he's just going to be kind of stuck a little bit. You know, if he is put on a good team, you might be able to see him shine a little bit more. But there again, you know, sometimes it's the people around you that kind of help you flourish. So who knows? The thing
about season 2 though is that I think we're going to be seeing opportunities. At least we'll have to see what some of the new heroes provide, because I think what was set up with this current plan for 2019 is that there's going to be more maps and more heroes. So we'll have to see as those get introduced stage by stage by stage, how those things shake up, along with the balance adjustments that are going to be made as well. But given more heroes, that opens up more opportunity for different types of strategies. And one strategy that could work out for them very well is if they actually just utilize Otto as a solo DPS. We're already seeing that kind of at the moment, where you did see like the solo May or the solo Doomfist or, you know, protect the McCree strategies that came out, dive strategies. So there have been a couple of those that have worked, and I think that could be something that Washington Justice down the line incorporates as a system to kind of play off of Otto, and that could be kind of a really solid point for them to shine. And we could see Washington Justice look a lot better if they utilize that as an opportunity. And Otto will then be spoken about in a much higher regard. Definitely.
You know, definitely won't be sleeping on him if Washington pulls out like a middle of the pack, you know, even challenging for playoffs. I think it's going to, you know, shock a lot of people and definitely bring it home for the team. But Heurix, let's wrap this up. Last little bit is for you. Plug everything, plug anything. The last little bit of the podcast is yours, my friend.
All right. Well, yeah, if you are currently into watching Contender stuff going on right now, you can go ahead and catch me alongside my casting partner and, guys like ZP and Avast, Leg Day, Jaws. We're casting NA Trials right now. It's going on this weekend. I don't know when this comes out, but it's going on this weekend as well as the next weekend as of this recording. Then we'll be going into some other projects as Contenders seasons wind up springing up for season 1, and then from there, who knows? So that's pretty much what I've got going on. And yeah, you can catch me at CT Heurix on Twitter as well, and definitely follow me because that's how broadcasters get paid.
That's true. Yeah, it definitely helps if you've got them social media. And for the record, so everybody in Audio Land knows, he's mentioning the 9th and 10th of February, as well as the 16th and 17th. So tune into
8th, 9th, and 10th. Sorry.
8th, 9th. Okay, fair enough.
And I think we'll have to see about that 16th and 17th. That might actually be
something else,
a different broadcast time. But definitely stay. Hey,
you just follow, okay?
The easiest way to get it done is to just follow me on Twitter. That's the easiest way. I'm actually trying on Twitter now. It's a new thing that I'm doing. So if you follow, you'll definitely get some. You'll definitely get some insight and some knowledge on when things are happening.
There you go. Well, thank you again for coming on and having a chat. It's been a blast. And again, I say this to everybody, you're more than welcome to come on if you've got a burning topic, please. I enjoy, chatting and, at least, helping out the community with some audio and video. I get it. Gyms are kind of boring, driving to work's a little dull. So, let me try and assist you as best as I know how. Let's talk some Overwatch. So again, if you ever want to come back, please let me know. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you the 5 listeners out there that I have. If you have any questions for either me or Heurix, again, below our faces are our Twitter handles. Please ask us. Please follow us. I hear that snapping for Twitch Primes works, so I'm hoping that snapping for Twitter followers works, but I'm not sure. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.